Hey, this is Amy Chaplin from PianoPantry.com with a quick recording showing you how I organize my devices. In my quest to find a functional and useful layout, I've gone back and forth between using pages, that is, every app visible on the main screen, and folders, that is, pulling multiple apps into a folder like the layout that you see here. So each one of these is called a folder. When I used the pages layout, it was generally comprised of around 6 to 8 pages. Each page was dedicated to a category of apps. The first page of the device were apps that I use on a daily basis. The next page were apps from my music studio. The next page were apps for food and travel, and so on and so forth. Even though this scenario can absolutely work, ultimately I found I didn't like having everything so spread out. It would take forever to move apps around other pages and simply felt tedious scrolling through the pages. Now, at the time, I'll admit I didn't use the search feature nearly as much as I do now, which would have made scrolling through pages less annoying. Nevertheless, I still found it hard to know exactly how many apps I had in certain categories, thus apps tended to get forgotten. After going back and forth several times, I finally settled on using this simplified folder layout you see here. Let me show you how you can create folders. You simply press and hold an app for 2 to 3 seconds until they begin to wiggle and show the X in the upper left-hand corner. From there, you can drag the apps into folders. When you want to create a new folder, like I'm going to do now, you just take an app and you drag it on top of another app, and then it creates a folder, and then the iPad chooses a suitable title based on the apps that you've put in it. But you can change that title very easily. To get them to stop wiggling, you can either press the home button or give them a second and they'll just eventually stop. So some may feel that the downside to having folders is that you have to tap twice, once to open the folder and then once to open the app. To me though, that's easier than scrolling through several pages. Besides, using the search function seems to be the fastest way to navigate to apps, anyway, regardless of which layout you use. In case you're not familiar with how to use the search feature, all you do is simply take your finger and pull down on the screen, and your most recently used apps will appear here. If you just type one letter, it will bring up apps that start with that letter, and that's often all it takes. The biggest upside I've noticed in using folders is that you can easily see how many apps you actually have. For example, I can easily see I have 3 different weather apps. I should say on this one I have 6 different weather and travel apps, 4 rhythm apps, and so forth. You'll notice on this recording I'm actually only showing you my iPad, but ultimately this is the exact same layout I use for my iPhone. On both devices, the first page is reserved for all my general and personal apps. The second page is reserved for apps for my music studio, and the third page is reserved for apps that my husband uses. Let's talk briefly about the dock at the bottom. The dock is the highlighted area down here on your screen that's visible no matter what page you're on. I try to use the dock only for items that I access frequently throughout the day, even if it means the dock isn't full all the way across. Especially on my iPad Pro, I could put several more across there. I don't fill up the dock just for the sake of filling up the dock. For example, even though I'm a huge Evernote user, I actually don't access it on my iPad on a daily basis. Even though I use Facebook daily, I don't access it on my iPad daily. Also, since my students use my iPad, I really don't want my Facebook to be on the dock. On the latest iOS version, they do have a feature that will show your recently used apps in the dock. I personally hate this feature. You can turn it off by going to your settings, and then under General, oh no, where did that go? There we go. Under General, you go to Multitasking and Dock, and then at the bottom, it just says Show Suggested and Recent Apps. If I turn that on and then go back to the screen, it will show the 3 most apps that I've been on the most recently. So that, to me, I just don't like that. I just like it to be the same things all the time. So I'm going to turn that back off. But you might like that. As far as folders go, I try to keep my folders as consistent as possible between the 2 devices. I never put more items in a folder than are visible on the front page of the folder. For example, on the iPhone, there are only 9 spots inside of a folder. My 12-inch iPad Pro that I'm showing you here today has 12 spots, I believe, or more, 16. Anything beyond that, and you have to then swipe inside the folder over to a second page, and I just want to be able to see how many apps are in one category on one page, so I don't want to have to scroll in the folders as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through each category and briefly open the folder so you can have a glance at the apps that I use within. Categories I use on my first page include utilities, unused, and this is mostly for all those annoying iOS apps that you can't remove, weather and navigation, travel, photo, video, music, wellness and food, Evernote, social, content, reading and news, documents, money and shopping, browsers, and then this is an app that's just for apps that my nephews like to play on. Or this is a folder, I should say, not an app. Excuse me. Sometimes these do get tweaked, of course. Like I know I've used in the past a folder called Productivity that housed things like Evernote and Google Keep and email and calendar and so forth. I do try to keep the titles of the folders within the length allotted so I don't have to see an ellipsis at the end like you see on this folder here where it says needs updated. For studio apps, categories include music prep, composing, note naming, history and classical, rhythm, theory, backing tracks, and sheet music. There are a few apps that didn't really fit into any category, so I have those below. And then I have a folder here for the apps that need updated before working with a new iOS. And then lastly, since I'm a slow adopter of new apps, believe it or not, I have a folder for apps that I've bought and still haven't done anything with. I call it my apps to test. And then again, finally, the third page is apps that my husband accesses on the iPad that I don't. The last thing I wanted to mention to you is about notifications. You might have noticed a minimal amount of red dots on my screen. Personally, I choose to keep notifications at a minimum. I don't even allow notifications from Facebook or Messenger, as I find it too distracting. I'll check Facebook when I decide my free time can be given to social media, not when Facebook tells me to. As a person who likes to clear tasks, those red little dots are like a blinking red light in my face. I really hate seeing them and have a need to clear them. Lastly, I wanted to show you how you can link to web pages on your iPad. So for example, I have a couple places where, here's my Piano Pantry one, if you click on it, it actually takes you to the Safari page. The way you can save those to your home screen is by clicking on the share button at the top. When you click on the share button, you just scroll over at the bottom and then it says add to home screen. If you click that plus button, it will then add it to, let's go ahead and add it. You can change the name, however you want to do it. I'm just going to leave it for now and then hit add. And then you can see that it added it right here. Now I'm going to remove it since I already have that. Delete. But that is a really convenient way to save web pages as well. So it doesn't have to just be apps on your screen. I also have an app, for example, I subscribe to a program called Classical Stretch, and it's a video streaming program. And so I just link to the online login directly on Safari so that I don't have to type in the web page every time I want to navigate to it. So that's a sneak into my iPad, and I hope you gleaned some tips for taming all of your apps and devices. For more organizational and productivity tips for music teachers, visit pianopantry.com. Follow me on Facebook or Twitter at Piano Pantry or on Instagram at AmyStudio88.